let's play this video. There is no audio, but I want to talk about this is super interesting to me, Jemele, because the WNBA, the women have realized what they're worth. And that's going to make for a fight with management who are not going to want to think they are worth that. These things between players and management are usually contentious, and the CBA is, they're not close here, but on Friday, before the All-Star game, you've got players dancing with the WNBA commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, and they're wearing shirts that say, pay us what you owe us, okay? So go ahead and play that instead of Greg Cody's bloody arm so that we can see what the ladies are doing here. What do you make of the economic fight at the center of this? Because it is really cool to see these players realize how valuable they are in the streaming age and how this has exploded. And of course, management's not going to be prepared for how to deal with that.
First, what people don't know, because I understand you probably can't play the audio, but they are dancing to Nuck If You Buck, which ironically is about fighting. So as we discuss the fight that is taking place between the players and, of course, NBA or ownership, I should say, WNBA ownership, here's a few things that I need people, to understand. The WNBA players are not asking for NBA money. They have never asked for NBA money. Currently, they get about 9% of the their portion of things is 9%. And what you saw across social media is people react in a way that shouldn't surprise you, Dan. You've covered sports enough to know that whenever there is labor strife or labor tension between player and owner, people side with the owners, which always blows my mind, because I don't understand this constant glazing of billionaires as if they need help, as if they need more support than they already do. And so already you see how these pieces are aligning when it comes to how fans and how people who are casual observers feel about this fight that they are waging. People have to understand that these women, maybe not this generation of women, but what the generations of women in the WNBA have had to endure to make sure they got to the point where, yes, they could say you owe us. They have shared hotel rooms. They have traveled commercially. They don't even have a pension. All right. The WNBA players do not have a pension. People talked about, say, a franchise like the Chicago Sky, where they are practicing in a rec facility, where if you're coming in there to do your 30-minute water aerobics class, you also get to see Angel Reese because she is working out and practicing at the same gym. So that's what we're talking about here, about resources and about investment. And so the players, they see what's coming down the pike. The fact is, next year, a $2.2 billion media rights deal kicks off for the WNBA. You have record investment. The Valkyries are already the newest WNBA team. They're already valuated at $500 million. The New York Liberty is valuated at $420 million. And I know this will really surprise you, Dan, given how long that you have covered sports. But when people keep on regurgitating that, oh, but they lost $40 to $50 million last year, what's the source of that? The source of that is, oh my God, it's the NBA. The NBA said it. You mean the same NBA that in 2011, when there was a lockout, they said they were losing $1 billion? You mean the same NBA in 1999, when there was another lockout, they told people the majority of NBA franchises were losing money? All I have to say is this, like, I ain't the brightest person in the world. I'm not the best business owner. But if the WNBA business was so bad, how are they adding 5 teams by 2030? Why are billionaires literally tearing an ACL to buy into this league if the business of it is so bad? It's because as much as the revenue certainly counts, the valuations tell you exactly what is possible for this league. And the players know this, and they want their cut.
Jemele, go through some of these numbers with me, because you said something that just shocked me, and I did not know it. 9% is half of what Dana White gives his fighters, and that's offensive, what Dana White is doing, and 9% is unbelievably bad.
Yeah, it is bad, because, listen, your rookies shouldn't be making the same as the bank manager at Bank of America. They shouldn't be making the same as that. And again, people need to compare it to as you said, other leagues and what they're making. Like we realize with the NBA is very generous. The players are getting a 50% split, but 9%, Dan, and no pension. All right.
That's crazy. But that's crazy. Is there anything else like that? Like what's comparable? Tony, you know this. Like MMA is notorious for being despicable to its labor, and this is half of that. Like 9% is offensive.
When you said that, I wasn't registering. Like, yeah, 18%. Like 9% is like less than. It's less than 10% of what everybody's making.
That's wild. Great math by you.
Thank you. On the fly.
That's lunacy,
On
though.
the fly.
That's lunacy. I mean, what's comparable to that? What historically, what do you have that would have an entertainment vehicle that's as valuable as this one, with the labor making 9%? And what are they asking for, Jemele? Like, if you can look at this in any way, sort of objectively, right? Because I know this is also something that you're rooting for. You would say, what else would compare to something as poor as 9% when you have probably the most, what has been the most undervalued thing in sports, given that the TV age and the streaming age is going to need this programming soon, given the numbers that it does?
Dan, I can't really think of a comparable, but I can say this in terms of what the players are asking for. Like, obviously, they're going to go for an even split. And I'm not sure if they're going to get it, but I will say if they get, like at this point, considering how low it is, if they get a UFC style split, it would be a major win. And, that's what sort of bothers me about the conversation around it, is that there is this mentality, especially when it comes to women. And then you're dealing with a league that is Black women, primarily Black women, 70%, that the idea is that they need to just be happy with the crumbs and whatever that they're given. It's like the people that are investing in this league, and even the NBA itself, the reason that they have chosen to subsidize this league is not because of charity. And because women's sports is always positioned as something charitable, as something that people are doing just because it's the right thing to do. No, this is a business. And the reason that the NBA started the WNBA is because they knew that this moment would eventually come. It wasn't because sure, David Stern had a vision of being able to do something that hadn't been done in America, which is have a viable, profitable league that showcases the very best women's basketball players in the world. But he also was thinking about this from a business standpoint, as was everyone who has been involved along the way. And even as the WNBA has been losing money, and I put that in air quotes because we frankly don't know what the books look like, because that's kind of the way it goes in professional sports. At the very least, they have provided a very safe tax bunker for a lot of NBA owners, hence why for a long time that they had no real reason to invest. And now that they see an opportunity here through Caitlin Clark, through Angel Reese, through the fact that just as a public being that much more interested in women's basketball, they want their share. I think to protect the product, and it makes sense for the owners to do this, is that you eventually, I mean, this season alone, the WNBA will play more games than they've ever had, through the regular season and the playoffs. So it'll be, 50 something games. You want to make sure you pay them enough, at least so that they're not going overseas. What does it say about the salary structure in the WNBA that the whole reason that Brittany Griner was playing in Russia is because in Russia, that has not so good of a record of human rights, pays their women's basketball players better than they do here in America. That's the whole reason why she was there. That's why Diana Taurasi was there. That's why many of them go overseas. They go overseas to countries that have terrible human rights violations because they actually could get paid what they're worth in those countries and not in this country.
Jemele, I was going to mention Brittany spending a year in a Russian jail directly linked to the embarrassingly low WNBA salaries. I was also going to mention the Unrivaled League in Miami began expressly because these women couldn't make enough money in their own league. What's it going to take to be fair with these salaries? And do you envision a time when the players may threaten a strike if they don't get what they want?
Where's all this headed?
So in my mind, I think both parties know that a strike, especially right now while the product is so hot, is not a good idea. But that being said, let's look at the resolve of these women. They're already not used to getting paid. I think they're willing to see this to the mat. And when they wore those T-shirts, it reminded me of another time they wore some T-shirts, which was just recently in the last couple of years. And that would be the year of 2020, where they wore T-shirts to support Raphael Warnock, the senator out of Georgia, who was polling at 9% before these players decided to take on a WNBA owner in Kelly Loeffler, who was the sitting senator at the time, who made some disparaging comments about the players participating in the Black Lives Matter movement. She made those comments. They took it personally. They did their research. They got behind her opponent, an opponent nobody thought could win. And they decided to put their entire platform and muscle behind an owner to get that owner kicked out of the United States Senate. So that's the type of resolve that they have. This is the crowd you don't want to mess around with because, yeah, to prove not to just prove a point, but to get what they're finally worth, they're willing to go as far as required to do this. And I hope that the WNBA ownership and the NBA league brass understand this. This is not the crowd to play with. Play with somebody else. Don't play with these women from the WNBA.
Jemele, to that exact point, though, like, isn't it the perfect time for a strike if your product is hot, if you have all this resolve? Say, okay, you guys want to make all this money off us and pay less than 10%, 9%. Like, all right, we're done. Like, we'll bring somebody else in.
I mean, that's exactly why they opted out. That's why they opted out of their collective bargaining agreement that was already in place, is because they saw and understood what the moment was. And likewise, as a part of this back and forth battle, hence why I find the timing of suddenly the New York media knowing exactly how much money that the WNBA lost last year, I found that to be pretty interesting.
There's a lot of interesting stuff here, Jemele. Like when you mention the resolve of these women, it is not lost on me that these women were stronger during 2020 than even the men were. You're mentioning that they're used to not making money. You've seen what's going on with the NFL Players Union. It's a disaster there, at least in part because those very wealthy people aren't willing to miss a single paycheck in unity. I would say these are the people to be least trifled with given all of the conditions. Like they're the most likely to strike and they're the most likely to have resolve.
Yeah, because they're already accustomed to not making money. And it's interesting that you bring in the NFL because one of the things that I think, I mean, granted, obviously NFL player salaries have increased dramatically. You have more and more players that are able to get fully guaranteed contracts. But if you look at the NBA history, is that their fight early on in the early stages when people wondered whether or not this league would survive. I mean, we're talking about the early 70s, particularly when they merged for the ABA and when Oscar Robertson fought for the league to have free agency, borrowing what Curt Flood did in Major League Baseball. People have this idea that the time to strike is when it's already profitable, when things are already good. That is not the time to strike. The time to strike is now when you're on the verge of something, because that's when you can get the conditions met. See, I don't think we'll ever see guaranteed contracts in the NFL because why would the owners ever agree to that? They have no reason to do it. But here in the WNBA, now is the time to get those things that would further cement them as a real legitimate professional league. Now is the time to strike for pensions. Now is the time to strike for higher salaries and set the tone. The NBA players set the tone in the early 70s. And that is why you have players making $300 and $400 million today. And so this is unfortunately a window into what is the American mentality about a lot of things, especially when it comes to women and Black women demanding things. It's like, no, you guys should really be on their side because the struggle that they're facing is a struggle a lot of women can relate to, being undervalued, being underpaid, but doing similar work. This should be easy to root for. And yet for a lot of people, they look at who is doing the asking and they have more of a problem with that as opposed to a problem with the people who have been exploiting them in this league for almost 30 years.
Did you have any opinion on Stephen Colbert being fired?
Well, it's funny that we're talking about this because it was interesting to see how when that figure got out, and again, we don't know where this comes from about whether, about the amount of money that he was losing. And I will say this, it was already a really bad precedent that Paramount set by settling with Donald Trump. And naturally, somebody like Stephen Colbert, who has always been politically fearless, when he expressed his displeasure with that, which, by the way, I think that's a pretty popular opinion, that people saw what was going on there. it just, the journalist in me, and as somebody who's in the medium of giving their opinion, it is just quite triggering for me because it's just another reminder of that everything is good until it's not. And, for him, I think seeing something like this happen to him is just a reminder about the kind of atmosphere and political climate that we live in. The truth is that a lot of these companies, a lot of media companies don't have the stomach for this kind of time. We're in a wartime mode when it comes to speaking out and speaking against the things that are happening in this country. And it's easier to get along and to stay uninvolved and to stay neutral. And when you don't, there's a cost and a price that comes with that. And I know some people will say, well, the show is losing money and that sort of thing. And I'm just of the opinion that, let's say Stephen Colbert never says anything about Paramount settling with Trump. You mean to tell me he wouldn't still be on air? Because I have a feeling that he would be. And those losses, they were more than acceptable when they felt like they weren't being challenged in the way that he was challenging them. So I think it's a very stark reminder. And unfortunately, it's a very harmful message to be sending right now.